Good lad. This is Ghost. He's another warhorse in training I've got here. He is very powerful. He's not a particularly tall horse, but he is a stallion, so he has a lot of strength here. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is to try to give people who don't understand about horses some familiarity with what horses can actually do and how they can move. Because in our modern society, horses are more or less pets for a lot of people. They're a leisure activity. But back in the medieval period, of course, horses were essential tools for farmers, for people going to market, and most importantly for knights fighting on the battlefield. So I think medieval people would have had a much more solid understanding of what a horse can do and the importance of a horse in their lives. So I think medieval people might have seen horses in a different way than we do. Horses were fundamentally important. If you were wealthy enough and travelling to market, your horse was your form of transport. If you were a knight or a lord going to war, your horse was your battle platform. And so I think today there aren't many people who have horses in their lives to a large extent, or to the same extent that they would have done in medieval times. And so I thought a basic primer on what a horse can do might be quite useful. I'm going to get on Ghost now, and for that I use a mounting block. Now I can get on Ghost very easily from the ground, but a mounting block saves me and it saves his back, most importantly. So using a mounting block is not a problem, and there are plenty of mounting blocks that we have from the medieval period, so we know they were used a lot. It basically makes it easier. It's a little bit like having a staircase instead of having to clamber up the side of a bus. You have steps to get on it. So using a mounting block isn't a form of cheating, it's actually a form of being decent. It's a way of not stretching the horse's back. Because when you get on a horse, and in Western Europe mostly you get on this side, which is called the near side, there is a certain twisting movement. So you can imagine you can pull the saddle down this way and that will cause twisting on the spine, and we want to minimize that if we possibly can. Most horses are fine with it, and in a lifetime of getting on and off a horse it probably won't make much difference, but I just prefer it. I think it's nicer to not have that twisting movement if you can avoid it. So let me get on and let me show you some of the basics. When you are moving a horse around and you're not on the back of the horse but you've got a saddle on, the thing that can get in the way are stirrups. Stirrups will bounce around if nobody's in them, and you do what's called running them up. So that is just simply running the steels up on the inside there, and that keeps them more or less out of the way. You can loop this out of the way as well if you really want to. But this is just quite a convenient way and a tidy way of transporting a horse around. When you get on a horse, you obviously need to run the stirrups down. So you do exactly that. You just pull it down and pull it down. Check the girth. In this case, the girth needs to go up a little bit. It's a bit too loose to get on. Good boy. Over you come. Good lad. Stand. Good lad. You're always training a horse, so making him stand still when I want him to stand still is a very important part of horse behaviour and horse management. So I do the girth up gently, check how tight it is. It needs to be fairly firm because it's got to hold me on. When I get on the horse, it will compress the padding of the saddle even more, and I will probably need to do this up again. So you need to constantly be aware of the equipment you've got. And I imagine in medieval times that was the job of a squire or somebody associated with the knight. The knight himself probably didn't do much of this kind of thing for himself, but his squires might do, or his pages, or anybody looking after him or his horses. Good boy, walk on. Good boy. Now when you get on a horse, you always want to take up the reins a little bit. There's lots of different ways of doing this. You can do it like this, or you can just pull the reins through, hold it loosely. You don't want the horse to go backwards, but you don't want the horse to go forwards ideally. And in my case, I'm going to stand on this box. As I said before, it stops, reduces that twisting movement. Reins are there to control it, foot goes in, and your weight is over the horse, and you gently lower yourself into the saddle and put your feet on this side into the stirrup. Adjust things and you're ready to ride. When you are used to getting on a horse regularly and the horse is used to you getting on it, everything usually goes very smoothly. But it's always worth double checking everything's in the right place, because it's about safety and comfort, mostly for the horse, but also for the rider. And what I need to do in a modern saddle to check the girth is lean down and use my thumb just to put tension on the girth. It's very loose. So as I've sat down on this, he's relaxed, he's slightly reduced his barrel width just by sort of my weight on him. And so leg forward and do the girth up. Don't necessarily even need to look, you can feel where the girth is going, and then there you are, ready to go. What I'm going to do first is warm him up. This is really important for any athlete. It's important for me, it's particularly important for Ghost. He's got to be eased into the job he's doing. So we just walk around on a long rein, let him get used to me being on his back, and I can get sort of settled in, and we can all be calm and start everything nice and slowly. Most modern horses in the West have 4 broad paces. There's a walk, there's a trot, there's a canter, and there's a gallop. The walk is a 4-time pace. Each leg moves independently. The trot, diagonal pairs of legs move, so it's a 2-time pace, 1, 2, 1, 2. The canter is a 3-time pace because a pair of legs move at the same time, and the opposite diagonal pair moves separately, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then a gallop, which is effectively an extended canter, drops back into a 4-time pace again, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because the horse is going at its maximum extension. There are modern day horses called tolting horses. They're Icelandic horses. They're usually quite small and feisty, and they are fantastic, and they do what's called a tolt, which is a style of moving the legs which is different from a walk, trot, canter or gallop. In medieval times, of course, we had amblers, and amblers were horses that walked very briskly, and I think that was likely to be a very, very fast and comfortable walk. And we also had tolters in medieval times as well, and I believe the origins of tolting come from the northeast of England. I'm not sure about that, but I believe they do. I believe that's what the genetics show. So let me show you some of these basic paces, and then we'll move on to more advanced things. Horses you will have seen in action. They might be in sports, but typically they'll be in movies and TV. And generally speaking, in movies and TV, especially when you've got an actor on a horse, they may be a variable skill in riding. Some of them are good riders. There's an awful lot that don't have a lot of experience. And so what you see is a very small subset of the manoeuvres that a horse can do on the battlefield. And I want to try and show you some of those manoeuvres now, bits and pieces, and show you how I try to get those kind of manoeuvres. But first, let me just show you the basics on Ghost. Walk on. Good boy. This is a walk. It's fairly brisk. As we've discovered, it's a bit faster than a human being walks, and obviously there are fast walks and slow walks, but it's nice and comfortable. If you're wearing armour, nothing jangles around too much, and it's a fairly steady, low energy kind of speed to go. This is a modern day trot, I don't particularly like the trot because you can see I'm bouncing around, and if I'm in armour, this jangles the armour a lot and feels very uncomfortable. I think this is very un-medieval. I don't imagine they'd have been bouncing around like this. There are two different types of way you can ride a trot. I don't know whether you can see. I'm now doing what's called rising trot, where I'm rising and sitting down every other pace. That's called a rising trot. And this is called a sitting trot, where I'm actually in closer contact with the horse more fully. This is a canter. It's, I find, a very, very comfortable pace to sit. I can do lots of other things. I can use one hand on the reins. It works well with armour. It's quite fast. It's probably the speed of somebody running quite briskly. Hey. And you can, of course, stop quite briskly from a slow, steady canter. I won't do a gallop because there's no point. We don't have a lot of space in here, and to get up to a proper gallop you need a decent outdoor area. But basically, walk, trot and canter in a straight line are what most horses can achieve. Now, if you want to keep facing that way but go that way, you move backwards, which is fairly straightforward. Most horses are trained to go backwards. Come on, back, back, back. Good boy. And then you go forwards again. So you can manoeuvre backwards and forwards relatively easily. What I also want to show you are some of the more advanced ways of moving a horse. Imagine you have a line of soldiers all mounted on horses who need to close their ranks up. They need to form up. And they need to move sideways. Well, how do you do that? You've got to move that way. Well, this is how you do it. You make your horse go sideways. You can see how I can go sideways fairly easily on a well-trained horse and back the other way. So I could adjust the lines of horses and squeeze those ranks together to do the massive, solid, knee-to-knee charge that the Franks were famous for. That would require sideways movement, and as you see, Ghost here is very good at that. And I would imagine all of the horses of the Frankish knights could move sideways like that. Maybe not as neatly as he can, but moving sideways is kind of important. Good boy. Now you can also move sideways at a canter, at a trot and a canter, and I'll just show you that as well. That could be useful for adjusting the line of attack, for example. So let me just show you that. This will take a little bit more concentration. But imagine, good boy, imagine I want to adjust my line of attack. You can see how, come on, over. You can see how we can move even at a faster speed if we were charging towards somebody and I wanted to modify who I was aiming for, or maybe I saw a gap in the enemy formation. Maybe there's a weakness in the enemy formation and I didn't want to angle. I could nudge my horse over at the canter and take advantage of that gap. So being able to go sideways on a horse is hugely important. And one of the other things that I think was probably used is the ability to effectively for your horse to be on his toes, a bit like a tennis player might be bouncing around on the balls of their feet, but you can have your horse ready to go at any moment, so you can go one way or the other or charge forwards. If your horse is just static like this is fine, this is nice and calm. But if I want to go forwards rapidly or backwards or sideways, there's a bit of a pause involved. But if I have my horse on his toes, bouncing around a little bit, it might be less comfortable for me, but it means that he can move more rapidly in any one direction. And as we know, fighting is about having small percentage advantages over your enemy. So keeping your horse on his toes is a very important part of it. Ghost here is quite good at this kind of thing. He's highly trained. I have my suspicions that there were a whole variety of different quality trained horses available. The very top destriers were probably like Ghost, very nimble, very capable. They do leg yielding, which is what I said about going sideways, backwards, forwards, all that kind of stuff, diagonally. And there were probably lower range horses that were less well trained. You paid less for them, just in the same way that you would pay less for a sports car of lower quality than a super sports car. So you kind of pay for what you get, and with a horse it's exactly the same. And I imagine back then it was exactly the same. If you got one of the top destriers, it cost you a fortune. And if you got a middle ranking one, it could do some of the stuff, but you know, it would still be a good horse, but it wouldn't be top of the heap. So Ghost here is in training, and as I say, he can do all of these kind of manoeuvres. So I'd like to think that he would have been a top destrier. I'll leave you to decide whether you agree or not.